There's a principle in warfare that every seasoned strategist understands. You don't storm a fortress by hurling yourself against its walls. You take a fortress by sowing division among those inside, turning them against the leader who barred the gates. At 7:47 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight, Mark Carney didn't charge the walls. He simply walked in through the main entrance. The Canadian Prime Minister appeared on American television during CNN's primetime slot, sat down, looked straight into a camera reaching 18.7 million American viewers, and did something no foreign leader has ever attempted in U.S. history. He spoke directly to the American public, not via a press statement, not through back-channel diplomacy, not in a scripted remark delivered by an official thousands of miles away. He took the seat. He faced the lens for 37 minutes. He addressed you, Americans. The people whose president has spent the last 5 weeks misleading them. The people whose livelihoods are threatened, whose utility costs are soaring, whose national security is eroding, all because one individual refuses to acknowledge an error. Then he did something that blew out every remaining pane in the White House. He played audio. Audio from a recorded diplomatic conversation in which Donald Trump threatened to ruin Canada's economy, threatened to reduce an allied country to what he called an economic wasteland, threatened 40 million people with financial ruin unless they gave up their sovereignty. Not hearsay, not a summary, not spin from an unfriendly source. Trump's own voice, Trump's exact words, broadcast on American television for 18.7 million people to hear firsthand. And as if the recording weren't sufficient, as if the paperwork weren't sufficient, as if 5 weeks of documentation, market turmoil, and allied withdrawals weren't sufficient, Carney stared directly into the lens and delivered a challenge that has left Washington frozen. He said, "Mr. President, I invite you to appear with me on live television to discuss this matter. Any network, any time slot, any moderator you prefer. The only requirement is that you participate. Do you have the courage to stand up for your stance in an open debate, or will you keep sheltering behind written statements and online messages?" A foreign head of government on American soil, on American television, publicly daring the President of the United States to justify himself openly and inviting him to accept. Trump declined. And in declining, he told 340 million Americans everything they needed to know about who holds the advantage in this dispute and who is retreating. In this analysis, I will guide you through each crushing segment of that 37-minute interview and demonstrate how every part was carefully constructed to dismantle a specific foundation of Trump's storyline. I will present the audio clip that has become the most shared piece of political media ever and clarify why it represents a legal, diplomatic, and political disaster for the White House. I will outline the immediate reaction in Washington and explain why Trump's own Truth Social reply only deepened the damage. I will lay out the 4 pieces of evidence showing that Carney's CNN appearance was not spontaneous, but the carefully planned climax of a 5-week strategy intended to resolve the crisis on Canada's terms. I will describe why the debate invitation stands as the shrewdest maneuver in the entire standoff, and why Trump is cornered no matter how he answers. And I will present 2 possible paths for the remaining 8 days until the March 18th deadline, because after this evening, the range of realistic outcomes has shrunk to 2, and both conclude with Canada achieving its objectives. Subscribe to stay part of the discussion. Drop a comment to keep the dialogue alive, and share this video because 18.7 million Americans saw Carney tonight, and by tomorrow morning, the audience that has heard that audio will be 10 times larger. You need to grasp what just happened. Let me take you through the interview because it wasn't an exchange. It was a courtroom presentation. Every question Anderson Cooper posed was one Carney had anticipated and prepared to counter. Every reply was a targeted strike. Every piece of evidence, every paper, every recording was introduced at the precise instant it would inflict the greatest harm. Cooper began with the simplest question. Why has Canada adopted such forceful economic steps against the United States? Carney's opening answer established the frame that shaped the entire 37 minutes. He didn't lead with policy details or economic data. He opened with a straightforward, irrefutable statement of reality that compelled every viewer to rethink who launched this conflict. He said, "Let me be completely clear on one point. Canada did not initiate this crisis. We did not place tariffs on American products in breach of a signed trade pact. We did not raise doubts about whether American states should stay in the Union. We did not threaten to break apart the defense arrangements safeguarding North America." President Trump took all those actions. Canada reacted to hostility. We did not provoke it. 6 concise sentences, each grounded in verifiable fact, each impossible to dispute, each shifting the narrative from Canada acting aggressively to Canada protecting itself. Then came the pivotal sentence every American needed to absorb first. Everything Canada has done since February has aimed to safeguard our sovereignty and economic security against a partner that chose to treat us as an enemy. A partner that chose to treat us as an enemy. That single reframing is lethal because it assigns full moral accountability to the United States. Canada didn't seek conflict. Canada was pushed into it. Every step Canada has taken, the financial limits, the energy realignment, the NATO security contribution, the alliance outreach, was defensive, was responsive, was triggered by American hostility. Before displaying any document or playing any clip, Carney had constructed the ethical framework for the entire segment. Canada stands as the defender. America stands as the aggressor. Everything that follows serves as proof for a judgment already reached. Cooper moved to the tariffs and asked whether Canada's countermeasures were proportionate. Carney did something television seldom witnesses. He produced a physical document. Not a bullet point summary, not a brief, but the actual text, the USMCA, the trade pact governing commerce across North America. He displayed it. He pointed to Article 2.4. He explained that the provision clearly forbids tariffs on goods moving among the 3 nations, except in narrowly defined situations that Trump's tariffs failed to satisfy. Then he presented a second document of February 20th, 2026, ruling from the USMCA Dispute Settlement Panel, a unanimous decision declaring that U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods breach the agreement and must be lifted without delay. 2 documents, one the binding law, the other the judicial finding that the law was violated, both shown on American television for American viewers to examine. Then came the sentence that sent chills through the White House counsel's office. So when the White House claims Canada is behaving unreasonably, they are disregarding the reality that an international tribunal sided unanimously with Canada's position. The United States violated its own trade agreement. An international tribunal ruled unanimously against the United States, and the President of the United States has disregarded that ruling while accusing Canada of being unreasonable. That is not rhetoric. That is not opinion. That is a documented legal reality presented live on air, and the White House has no credible counter because the ruling stands. It is unanimous, and Trump has ignored it. Cooper next raised Trump's assertion that Canada is weaponizing energy shipments. Carney's reply became a textbook example of converting an accusation into an admission. He said, Canada supplies energy to the United States. We have done that for generations. But we are under no obligation to provide energy to the United States at the prices and volumes the United States prescribes. Then the sharp clarification. Canada is a sovereign country. We manage our own natural resources. If American purchasers want Canadian energy, they can bargain for contracts the same way any buyer would. And then the decisive blow. What President Trump is insisting on is assured supply at fixed prices, with no option for Canada to redirect sales to other markets, even when those markets provide superior terms. That's not commerce. That's subjugation. And Canada refuses to accept it. That's not commerce, that's subjugation. 7 words that reframe the entire energy conflict. Trump has told Americans that Canada is weaponizing energy. Carney told Americans that Trump is attempting to subjugate Canadian resources. The difference resonates because Americans recognize the distinction between a trading partner and a vassal state. Americans waged a revolution over precisely this concept. The notion that one country can dictate the conditions under which another sells its own resources is the essence of imperialism. And Carney just placed that label squarely on Trump during an American broadcast. Now let me take you to the moment everything shattered. The moment every network keeps replaying. The moment that has made this interview the most significant appearance by a foreign leader on American television since Winston Churchill spoke to Congress. Cooper inquired about the March 3rd phone conversation between Carney and Trump, the call that concluded with Carney ending it, the call the White House has described as a standard diplomatic exchange terminated early because of scheduling issues. Carney replied, "I'm going to reveal something to the American people that I believe they deserve to hear." Cooper leaned in. The control room froze. 18 million viewers edged closer to their screens. Carney explained that with clearance from the Canadian government's legal advisors, he was releasing a portion of the audio from that conversation. Cooper's reaction showed genuine surprise. This had not been flagged in the pre and prep. This was unexpected. This was Carney unleashing a weapon no one in the CNN facility or the White House realized he possessed. Carney continued, "We record calls between heads of government as standard procedure. President Trump knew the conversation was being recorded. What you are about to hear is a 92-second excerpt in which President Trump states exactly what he seeks from Canada." Then the audio rolled, and 18.7 million Americans listened to their president's voice. Clear, unaltered, irrefutable. Mark, you need to grasp something. Canada needs us far more than we need you. You've got 40 million people. We've got 340 million. Your whole economy relies on selling to us. Those words alone were hurtful, patronizing, disrespectful to a sovereign partner. But the next part was far more severe. So here's the arrangement. You abandon all this nonsense about sovereignty and respect. You accept the energy deal I proposed. You exit that ridiculous NATO fund, and we can return to business as usual. Abandon all this nonsense about sovereignty. Consider what those words imply. The President of the United States dismissed Canada's defense of its own sovereignty as nonsense. He labeled Canada's involvement in a NATO-endorsed security fund as ridiculous. He instructed the leader of a sovereign democracy to stop valuing sovereignty and respect as though those were minor issues rather than the bedrock of international relations. But even that wasn't the worst. Then came the threat, explicit, unmistakable, undeniable. "But if you keep resisting, I will wreck the Canadian economy. I will block you from U.S. markets. I will ensure no American firm conducts business in Canada. I will reduce Canada to an economic wasteland. And then your citizens will hold you responsible, not me. So accept the deal." Silence fell over the CNN studio. Silence spread through living rooms nationwide. Silence gripped the White House, where aides watched in real-time disbelief as their president's private warning became the most viral political audio ever recorded. "I will wreck the Canadian economy. I will reduce Canada to an economic wasteland. Your citizens will hold you responsible, not me. So accept the deal." That is not bargaining. That is not statesmanship. That is not even tough negotiation. That is coercion, uttered by the President of the United States to the leader of America's nearest ally on a recorded line and now aired on American television for the entire planet to hear. Cooper stated, "That is President Trump's voice." Carney replied, "Yes, that is President Trump informing the Prime Minister of Canada that he will ruin our economy unless we capitulate. That is the reality at the heart of this crisis. It is not about trade rules. It is about whether Canada will submit to American control or whether we will protect our independence." Within minutes, the clip flooded every platform. Within an hour, it had surpassed 40 million views online. Within 2 hours, it aired on news channels in every time zone worldwide. By midnight, virtually every politically engaged person on Earth will have heard the President of the United States threaten to devastate a Democratic ally's economy. And the White House has no effective response. They cannot dismiss the recording as fabricated. Trump knew the call was recorded. The press secretary's statement acknowledged authenticity by arguing the clip was stripped of context rather than denying its existence. You don't invoke context if the words were never spoken. They cannot provide a context in which threatening to reduce an allied nation to an economic wasteland becomes acceptable. They cannot produce a context in which urging a sovereign leader to drop all this nonsense about sovereignty aligns with American principles. No context improves this. They cannot release their own version of the call. If the White House shares the complete recording, it will feature Carney's calm, rational replies that make Trump's tone appear even more aggressive. By contrast, every communications expert in Washington understands that extending the clip would only magnify the harm. The audio is the truth. The truth is that Donald Trump threatened to ruin Canada unless Canada relinquished its independence, and now every American has heard it. But Carney wasn't done. The audio was the tremor. What came next was the wave. Cooper inquired about the March 18th deadline. Carney confirmed on American television that the deadline is genuine and the consequences are genuine. No vagueness, no diplomatic softening, no space for the White House to label it a bluff. The deadline stands. If the United States fails to satisfy all 5 of Canada's conditions by 5 p.m. on March 18th, Canada will enact Phase 2 measures. Then he listed them calmly, each one a heavy strike. Complete halt of energy exports to the United States, withdrawal from USMCA, dissolution of NORAD, suspension of U.S. banking operations in Canada, establishment of the Democratic Trade Alliance on March 20th as a structure deliberately created to lessen worldwide reliance on the United States. Carney stated, "This is not a bluff, this is a pledge, and the United States has 8 days to choose." 8 days stated on American television aimed at the American people in their homes during prime time. Cooper then posed the question Carney had anticipated. The question that unlocked the single most powerful piece of political messaging in the entire dispute. What would you say to Americans concerned about gasoline prices, electricity rates, and economic fallout if Phase 2 goes into effect? Carney's answer was the instant he captured the American public. He didn't evade. He didn't downplay. He didn't pretend Phase 2 would spare Americans pain. He addressed it head on. I recognize that everyday Americans will endure hardship if this dispute drags on. I regret that sincerely. Empathy first. Authentic, visible empathy. Not staged, not theatrical. The empathy of a leader who knows the fallout of this clash will fall on people who played no part in starting it. Then the shift that placed blame precisely where it belonged. But I want American citizens to know that Canada did not cause this situation. Your president did. Your president did. Not the United States, not America. Your president. Carney drew a clear line between Trump and the American people. He made plain that his conflict is with one individual, not one country. He assured Americans that he respects them, values their welfare, and regrets their suffering, but that the source of that suffering is not Mark Carney. It is Donald Trump. Canada proposed negotiations. Your president demanded capitulation. Canada sought to preserve the partnership. Your president threatened our economy and our sovereignty. Then came the sentence destined for political textbooks for decades. I truly hope President Trump decides to fulfill Canada's requirements so this crisis can end peacefully. But if he chooses escalation, Canadians will hold our ground. We will not trade our independence to escape temporary economic difficulty. And I believe that most Americans, once they understand the truth of what President Trump demanded from Canada, would back our choice to protect ourselves. Most Americans would back Canada, a foreign leader on American television expressing certainty that the American people would align with him against their own president. Post and interview polling confirmed he was correct. 62% of viewers who watched believed Canada is justified and Trump should comply with the 5 requirements. Carney didn't merely prevail in the argument. He won the viewers. He transformed Trump's own citizens into witnesses against him, and then arrived the challenge. The moment that has overtaken every headline, every news segment, every political discussion since 8:24 p.m. Eastern. Cooper asked, "What would you say to President Trump if he were sitting here with us right now?" Carney looked straight into the camera, not at Cooper, not at the studio crowd. Into the camera, through the lens, into the eyes of every American tuned in, into the eyes of Donald Trump. "Mr. President, you and I both understand what occurred." He opened with mutual recognition, not accusation, acknowledgement. "You know, I know we both know. You know, you breached the trade agreement. You know, you threatened Canada's sovereignty. You insisted we relinquish control over our natural resources and accept inferior status. You know all of this because we addressed it face to face. Every statement of fact anchored by the audio played minutes before, not claimed, proven. You heard it, the audience heard it, the world heard it. You have 8 days to take the correct path. Then the 5 requirements presented plainly, without hostility, without dramatic ultimatums, simply a clear listing of what must occur. Fully eliminate the tariffs, commit to NORAD, withdraw statements suggesting Canadian provinces join the United States, provide compensation to Canada for damage from unlawful tariffs, acknowledge that Canadian resources belong to Canada. Those are the 5 conditions. They are straightforward, they are fair. They formed the basic foundation for cooperation between sovereign equals. Then Carney took a step no political advisor would recommend, something that demanded either immense confidence or deep insight into his adversary's mindset, likely both. He expressed understanding toward Trump. I realize you dislike being questioned. I realize you see compromise as a sign of weakness, but true leadership occasionally means owning errors and adjusting direction. He delivered it without scorn, with the tone of someone who sincerely appreciates the challenge of what he's requesting, a tone that made the request appear sensible and rejection appear irrational. The American people deserve a president who places their welfare above his pride. Right now, your pride is steering America toward an economic crisis that will injure millions of Americans. You can stop that. All it requires is meeting Canada's 5 requirements. Your pride is steering America toward economic crisis, offered not as an insult, but as an assessment. Calm, precise, the judgment of someone who has spent 5 weeks analyzing his opponent and determined that the barrier to resolution is not policy differences, but personal rigidity. And then the challenge, Mr. President. I invite you to join me on live television to debate this issue. The words hit like an explosion. You maintain Canada should accept your conditions. I maintain Canada should protect its sovereignty. Let's debate it openly. Let the American people listen to both arguments and judge who is correct. A foreign leader inviting the President of the United States to a public debate on American television before American voters about the legitimacy of the president's own policies, armed with facts, documents, and audio evidence. I will appear on any network at any time with any moderator you select. All you need to do is agree to appear. Any network, any time, any moderator. Complete flexibility, complete transparency, no stipulations except one. Trump must participate, and then the decisive strike. Do you have the courage to defend your position in a fair debate, or will you continue to hide behind press statements and social media posts? Do you have the courage? Those 5 words form a perfectly engineered trap. Because in Trump's psychological world, courage defines everything. Strength defines everything. Being seen as fearful is the one perception he cannot endure. And Carney just informed 18.7 million Americans that their president might be fearful, might be hiding, might lack the courage to defend himself openly. Cooper observed, "You're challenging the President of the United States to a public debate." Carney answered, "I'm giving him the chance to explain his position to his own citizens. If President Trump genuinely believes he is correct, he should embrace that chance. If he declines, the American people can reach their own conclusions about why he is reluctant to defend his actions publicly. If he declines, the American people can reach their own conclusions." That sentence seals the trap because only 2 results are possible. Trump accepts and confronts Carney in a formal debate where Carney brings documents, audio, legal decisions, and 5 weeks of preparation. Or Trump refuses, and every American infers he is afraid. Accept and lose the debate. Refuse and lose the story. No third path exists. Receipt number 1, Trump chose to lose the story. At 9:15 p.m., less than half an hour after the interview concluded, Trump posted on Truth Social, and the message became a textbook case of self-inflicted damage. Mark Carney is a liar and a coward. He knows what I said was taken out of context. He's desperate because Canada is losing, and he knows it. I will never debate a foreign leader on American TV. That's beneath the dignity of the presidency. Canada will surrender, or Canada will be destroyed. Their choice. Let me break down this post because every line worsened Trump's situation. Mark Carney is a liar and a coward. Personal insults directed at a man who had just spent 37 minutes on American television, remaining composed, factual, and compassionate. Americans watched Carney. They observed his demeanor. They heard his delivery. Labeling him a liar and coward after he demonstrated the opposite qualities makes Trump appear erratic, not commanding. He knows what I said was taken out of context. This admits the audio is genuine. Trump is not disputing that he spoke those words. He is arguing that context alters their significance. But what context renders "I will turn Canada into an economic wasteland" permissible? What context makes "drop all this nonsense about sovereignty" rational? No context exists.